I spent the last 2 weeks reading and analyzing hundreds of One Piece theories, and I found 7 theories that I think will absolutely blow your mind. The first theory we're going to start with is what I call the Luffy's mom theory, because we still don't know who the main character's mom is. We know about his 2 brothers, Ace and Sabo, as well as his dad and grandpa, the famous revolutionary Dragon, and the hero vice admiral of the Marines, Garp. But that one major part of his family, his mom, is still missing. Hundreds of theories have been crafted over the years, but one stands out amongst all the others. This theory states that we have known Luffy's mom all along, and that he may have even fought against this person already in the story. The person I'm talking about is Crocodile. For years, this Croco Mom theory has been the most popular theory about Luffy's mom because it makes so much sense. It all starts during the Impelled Down arc when Ivankov reveals that he knows Crocodile's secret from when he was a rookie pirate. Ivankov has the power of the Horu Horu no Mi, which can change the hormones of a person and even change their gender. We see Ivankov do this to one of the guards in Impelled Down, so it's possible that Crocodile's big secret is that he was once a woman and with the help of Ivankov changed genders to become a man. Further facts that continue to justify this theory are that Crocodile was a rookie around the time Luffy was born, and then also Oda has confirmed that Luffy's mother has already appeared in the story. He didn't confirm when, where, or who it was, but all he said was that we have seen Luffy's mother. At Marineford, we see Crocodile save Luffy from Mihawk's attacks, then later save Ace from being executed. This is after their fathers' identities had been exposed. So maybe it's possible Crocodile didn't know the fathers of Ace and Luffy, but once he learned that information, his ideals changed. On top of all of this, this character was shown at Roger's execution in the One Piece live action. A female with a similar earring to the one that Crocodile wears. In the anime, Crocodile was also at the execution, but funnily enough, we can only see the back of his head. So this hides any possible female features on his face that we could see. Something's really fishy about all of this. But the only problem with this theory is that one thing counteracts everything I've said so far. In Alabasta, Crocodile tries to kill Luffy multiple different times. So if he is Luffy's real mother, he tried to kill his own son. But it's still possible Crocodile wouldn't have recognized Luffy at that time in the story and he wouldn't have known who his father was. Okay, that was a huge theory to start with, but you have to admit, it's uncanny how many coincidences there are between Crocodile and Luffy. The next theory in this video involves Marshall D. Teach, otherwise known as Blackbeard. There are countless theories about Blackbeard on the internet, ranging from how he obtained 2 devil fruit powers, why he's hunting specific people to steal their devil fruits, his different personalities, and many others. The specific theory I'm going to talk about in this video is his secret 3rd devil fruit. To start this theory, like the last one, we're going to talk about Impelled Down. This One Piece prison is directly based off of Dante's Inferno. If you don't know what that is, Dante's Inferno is basically a representation of the 9 circles of hell, which has a gradual descent into increasing levels of punishment, the same as the levels in Impelled Down. At the bottom of this prison is Satan himself, with 3 heads. Blackbeard's flag also has 3 heads, and we've also seen him with 3 different personalities throughout the story. Speaking of 3s, in Norse mythology there are 3 different realms: Niflheim, Midgard, and Helheim. By using the devil fruit of darkness, the Yami Yami no Mi, Blackbeard can take away powers and put people into a world of nothingness. Niflheim is a cold and dark realm in Norse mythology, so it's pretty similar. Midgard is the realm of Middle-earth, so this is where all the people and animals live. With the power of the Gura Gura no Mi, Blackbeard can now manipulate the earth and destroy the world, or the Midgard. We also know that Blackbeard has a very strange body. Marco, the doctor of Whitebeard's crew, confirmed this. This could be his 3rd devil fruit being detected, the devil fruit that would line up with Helheim in Norse mythology, the realm of the dead. However, we never see this 3rd devil fruit, possibly because Blackbeard never sleeps. We learned in Dressrosa that when Cavendish falls asleep, Hakuba is awakened. So maybe when Blackbeard sleeps, this 3rd devil fruit power is summoned, the Satan Mythical Zoan Devil Fruit. This would match the Norse mythology theory and also possibly explain why Blackbeard is alone and crying when Whitebeard's crew finds him. Maybe Blackbeard fell asleep and his Satan power was summoned, wreaking havoc on his home and family. This would explain why he's vowed to never go to sleep again. This theory is extremely deep and well thought out, and let me know what you think of it in the comments. Now the next theory is about Luffy's father. And unlike his mother, we do know who his father is. Monkey D. Dragon is the father of Monkey D. Luffy, but there's still little known information about this man. And out of the few things we do know, his devil fruit power is not one of them. So this theory is about his devil fruit, and there's 3 different possibilities for Dragon's devil fruit power. The only evidence we have to go off of is his appearance in Log Town, where a massive wind and rainstorm comes out of nowhere right before he saves Luffy. Based on this, the popular theory is that he has a Wind Logia devil fruit, but there's another theory that says he has a mythical Zoan Thunderbird power. The Thunderbird would explain multiple things: the lightning bolt saving Luffy's life, how Dragon is able to travel so fast, and possibly the X-shaped scars on Dragon's face. In mythology, Thunderbird wings are sometimes depicted as X's, and the scars on Dragon's face kind of look like X's. The last devil fruit theory, and my personal favorite, is that he has the Rain God devil fruit. We know how Luffy's devil fruit Nika translates to Sun God. Dragon could be the Rain God. All the way back in Skypiea, they mentioned a Forest God, Earth God, and Rain God in the Nolan flashbacks. If the Sun God has a devil fruit power, it's probably safe to assume the other 3 god forms also have devil fruits. The Rain God would also explain Dragon's appearance in Log Town and the storm that was there. I think that one of these 3 theories is correct, and hopefully we know sooner rather than later what Dragon's real devil fruit power is. The next theory that I'm going to share with you is that we already know how Luffy dies. This theory has been around for a while, but has surged in popularity again over the past year or so. And to understand where this theory originates from, we need to go back and take a look at the post-war arc, where we learn more about Luffy's childhood and his adventures with Ace and Sabo. There's an episode where the brother trio takes on the Tiger of the Forest, and we see Luffy wearing a yellow tank top. When the front of this tank top is shown, you see 2 pig heads, and it reads Biyoshi. Biyoshi is a Japanese word, and when you translate that into English, it means death from disease. It makes no sense for something like that to be written on a kid's t-shirt, so this has to have some sort of meaning about something. Death from disease is pretty sinister, and then with the 2 pigs on top of it, it's hard to tell what Oda means by this. In Japanese, pig/pork is said as buta, so 2 pigs plus Biyoshi gives you buta buta Biyoshi, or pig disease death in English, which to be honest doesn't make a lot of sense. Overall, the most common deduction is that this is foreshadowing Luffy's death, saying that he will ultimately die of a disease. The former king of the pirates, Goldie Roger, also died of illness, so it's very possible that Luffy's death will be tied into the same illness that Roger suffered. Moving away from Luffy, the next theory in this video is about Buggy the Clown. Through some crazy plot armor and extreme luck, Buggy went from a random East Blue pirate to one of the 7 warlords of the sea, then one of the 4 emperors of the sea. So my theory is that Buggy will be the person who becomes king of the pirates, not Luffy. Luffy will no doubt probably be the strongest pirate in the world, don't get me wrong, but as we know, Luffy just wants to be free. The idea of ruling people isn't really Luffy's style, but it's definitely Buggy's style. Buggy is obsessed with power, so I'm sure he will jump at the chance of claiming the throne as king of the pirates. Luffy will ascend Roger and become something more than just the pirate king. He will probably become the pirate god or something similar to that. But if you think about it, the entire series, Buggy has just been falling upwards the entire time. Instead of getting set back from failure like a normal person, Buggy seems to succeed from failure. So I believe him becoming the king of the pirates is a very real possibility. Next up is a theory revolving Shanks and Luffy, and it's one that many of you might not like, but it could be the truth. This theory is that Shanks purposely gave Luffy the Gomu Gomu no Mi because he could tell Luffy had something special about him. If you don't remember, Luffy eating the devil fruit is pretty much portrayed as an accident, and Shanks didn't mean for it to happen. So we think. Now, I don't think that Shanks knew exactly what the Gomu Gomu no Mi was, but I do think he knew it was something more than a simple rubber power. Many people think Shanks knew Luffy was destined to carry on the will of D, which is plausible because his former captain, Roger, also had D in his name. So because of this, Shanks purposely left the devil fruit on the counter at Makino's bar because he knew that sooner or later Luffy would end up eating it. If this devil fruit was so important to Shanks, there's no way he would have left it on an open chest on the counter. On top of that, Shanks has really good observation haki, so that he definitely would have noticed Luffy grabbing the devil fruit and then eating it. I think that it's reasonable to assume Shanks learned from Oden what Joy Boy is and the Nika devil fruit, not necessarily what it looked like, but he probably heard it through a story from Oden or something. So everything about Shanks just leaving this important devil fruit out in the open is super fishy to me, and I can't help but believe Shanks was planning something. The last theory in this video is about the one and only Usopp. I'm sure by now you've realized most of Usopp's lies have become true. Lies like a giant goldfish, a country of dwarves, a Cerberus, a 30 million berry bounty, a real-life dragon, all became true. And there's more lies than that. Those are just a few examples. The theory in this is that Usopp isn't actually lying. Too many of these lies have come true now for it to just be a coincidence. So people think he's unintentionally using really advanced future sight. In Usopp's mind, he thinks he's making something up, but in reality, he's subconsciously saying something that will happen in the future. You know, this could make sense. Most of the time when he lies, it's in a stressful situation. So the nerves and the stress of that situation could end up making him unknowingly tap into a vision of the future and his mouth just spits it out. Just something to think about. Let me know your opinion on these theories in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, check out my last video about swordsmen in One Piece. One Piece is in its final saga, and here are 10 characters that could possibly die within this saga. Now I want to say that I don't think all of these characters will die, but I do think a few of them will, and it's very possible several of them will get beat but won't die. So they'll be like locked up and impaled down or something similar to that. And every character I have ranked here is a really important character to the story, so I don't think there's any way that 10 super important characters die in the final saga. If you take a look at the top 10 deaths in the first 1,000 episodes of the series, number 10 is like Mont Blanc Noland or something. Was he important? Yes, but was he one of the biggest characters in the story? Not so much. But in this list, I have 10 really important characters to the story, and if they die, it will definitely make a big impact in the world of One Piece. Before we get started, I want to thank you guys on the support for the last video. That was absolutely insane, and I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. But enough yapping. Here's number 10. Rayleigh. Rayleigh's a character that I'm not really sure on how he will die. I can see two different options for his death. The first being that he just lives out the rest of his days watching Luffy's success as a proud mentor. Considering he was the one that trained him during the time skip, I could really see that and have Rayleigh see the full circle of what Luffy's extent comes to be by the end of the series. And once Luffy becomes king or whatever happens at the end, we can see Rayleigh die in peace, seeing the new era begin. Now the second is much different. It's that he dies in a battle, and this could literally be anywhere. He could be going to save Luffy or going to save a random kid he met 2 days ago, but I believe if he runs into any crew that's going to go to the extent of killing him, it would have to be the Blackbeard Pirates. So if Rayleigh has a run-in with the Blackbeard Pirates, things could get dicey for him. Number 9 is Garp. I think that Garp will be Luffy's second and last traumatic event. As we know, Ace was the first of these events for Luffy, and Garp is also just one of the guys from the first pirate era with Roger. And with his death, that will really be the event that signifies the end of the pirate era with Roger and the beginning of the new era with Luffy or whoever else. Now I want to mention that I think Sengoku will stay alive. A lot of people out there think he's going to die, but in my mind, I see him being that old guy, the one old guy from the old era that we cut back to just randomly hear his opinions from time to time. It already happens. We kind of saw it in Dressrosa, and then also at the time the Reverie was happening, we had a couple little cutbacks to him and his thoughts on stuff, and I think that pattern will continue for Sengoku. Now number 8 on this list is Akainu. Luffy is going to get his get back at some point and revenge Ace. It's inevitable. It's just a matter of time, and I think it either has to be Luffy or Dragon that takes down Akainu. If it's anyone else in the series, it doesn't do it justice at all. Now I know what you're thinking. Why Dragon? Well, I wanted to include Dragon in this conversation because I feel like Dragon / Sabo, if those are the two that do this, Luffy wouldn't be as mad about it that he didn't get to take him down himself, you know what I'm saying? But that's Akainu. I think Luffy has to take down Akainu, or Akainu could get assassinated by the Gorosei or something. That's a possibility. Number 7 is Mihawk. I feel like Mihawk is pretty obvious to be on this list. I mean, ever since the Baratie, we know that something between him and Zoro is going to go down at some point. And just for the sake of Zoro's character, for him to reach his goal of becoming the world's greatest swordsman, Mihawk has to go down and has to be defeated. It will be an absolutely amazing fight once it finally happens. I cannot wait for that. And I feel like we're going to continually get secrets dropped to us about Mihawk leading up to this fight, because there's got to be something Mihawk is hiding. And with this fight, like Luffy and Akainu, I don't think anyone else other than Zoro can be the one to defeat him, unless we possibly get introduced to some top world government swordsman that takes down Mihawk and then becomes Zoro's new target. But that's very theoretical. Right now, Zoro vs. Mihawk seems pretty set up. Now, number 6 is Dragon. A lot of people think he's going to die, but I don't really see how that happens. I don't fully agree with this, but I still put him on here for a reason. I do believe, I will say, that no pirate can take him down. Any pirate crew, Shanks, whoever it is, I don't think can take down Dragon. I know we don't actually know his strength level yet, but he has to be abnormally strong, guys. If he's not strong, all the buildup over the years would be such a waste to what could be a great character. I will be actually so upset if Dragon is not as strong as we make him out to be. So like I said, no pirate's going to be the one that takes him down. If we do see Dragon fall, it will be from Imu himself. Either that or him just getting completely ganged up 10v1 by the Gorosei or whoever else. Anyone else should not be at his level of strength and be able to take him out if he's as strong as we believe him to be. Imu and maybe one or two other guys should be the only ones capable of doing that. Now before we get into the top 5, I want to talk about one person I think will stay alive that a lot of people seem to disagree with, and that is Sabo. A lot of people think Luffy's going to lose both of his brothers. We've already gone through that storyline. Sabo was dead, Ace died, Luffy lost both of his brothers. It's already happened. I think if Luffy's losing another family member, it's more likely Dragon or Garp. So that leads me into number 5, which is Trafalgar Law. Now, like Dragon, I don't think this one could happen, but some things have already been placed into the story to kind of foreshadow this event. In Dressrosa, we learned about the Immortal Operation, which basically allows Law to make someone immortal, but at the cost of his own life. So it's very possible this is how Law goes out, and if he does that operation, it's going to be on Luffy. I don't think anyone else Law cares about enough to do it on. And we've heard time and time again that Luffy's lifespan has been decreased. When he first used Gear 2, they said it, Gear 5, Gear 4, all of this says that Luffy's lifespan decreases every time he uses it. I don't know if that's the truth, but that's what has been mentioned in the story. So even though I don't really think Law will be one to die, I put him number 5 because it would be a death that hits Luffy really, really hard. Law could almost be an ace level death for Luffy. So let's go into number 4, which is Marco the Phoenix. The entire One Piece community thought he was going to die in Wano. Now, I do think we will see him die, but we gotta remember his devil fruit power. He is the Phoenix. Considering that devil fruit power, we'll also see him reborn again. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Like if a baby Marco is reborn again, that's wild. I think that's how Phoenixes work. So that's how I think Marco will die, but I also think he'll be reborn. If Marco's to die and completely die, it just proves that Oda hates the Whitebeard pirates. Like, Marco's death will solidify the fact that Oda completely hates the Whitebeard pirates. First it was Ace with the whole execution, then it was the captain himself, Whitebeard, and actually before all of that it was Thatch killed by Blackbeard, and then later after the Marineford War and the Revenge War, most of the Whitebeard pirates got wiped out by Blackbeard. If Marco also goes down, it would be a very sad ending for a great crew. So I don't see him completely dying. If he does die, I see him getting reborn. Now number 3 is Shanks. I really didn't want to include Shanks into this list, but it does seem inevitable that his death might actually happen. Something's been going on with Shanks' character lately that I don't really like. Pre-time skip at the very beginning of the story, when we see Shanks' reactions to Luffy's first bounties, he looks like a proud dad who just saw his kid score a touchdown. However, recently that has seemed to go away. When we see Shanks react to Luffy's bounties now, it's not as much of a smile and laugh and party. There's maybe a little bit of a smirk in there, but the vibe that I get is that Shanks is more excited than proud. Like, he's excited that Luffy is finally strong enough and finally has become someone worthy of rivaling him. And I know a lot of people out there feel the same way as me because there are countless theories about Shanks giving Luffy the devil fruit on purpose. There's the whole rat-haired Shanks meme. So it's going to be interesting to see how the story plays out. If we were still in pre-time skip, I would tell you that Shanks would be proud of Luffy becoming king of the pirates, but now I don't think Shanks would be. If they met right now, Luffy would be really excited, like seeing an old pal again, but I don't think Shanks would reciprocate that energy. But with all this being said, that means Shanks might have to be taken down in the future of One Piece. Now number 2 is a man that you're probably expecting to be on this list, and that's Blackbeard. Blackbeard is just a character that I think has to die for the story to end. Whatever the ending might be, I assume it'll at least be a positive ending for Luffy. I'm hoping. If it's a sad ending for Luffy, that'd be a terrible way to go out. But if it's a positive ending and Blackbeard is still on the prowl at the end of the show, and even at least locked up in prison, I feel like there would still be some loose ends left in the story. So Blackbeard's gotta go. Same as Akainu, I think this is a revenge battle for Luffy. Just considering what happened to Ace and any other friends and family Luffy has had get attacked by Blackbeard, Luffy's gotta take him out, one-on-one. And number 1 of the upcoming deaths in One Piece, I think, is a Straw Hat crew member. Specifically, 2 guys. The first might not be a big surprise. A lot of people think he's going to die, and that is Usopp. As much as I don't want it to happen, I think it's going to. One of the Straw Hats is going to die. And Usopp is the fan favorite to die because a lot of people think that his death will finally allow him to achieve his dream of being a brave warrior of the sea. It does make sense. If he dies some sort of valiant death, he'll finally become a brave warrior. But this theory has been around for years, and Oda is known for changing things if people figure it out. If this was his plan, I think Oda has changed it already because so many people guessed it. And if it isn't Usopp, the other Straw Hat I think it will be is Jinbei. Jinbei won't hit as hard as some of the Straw Hats that have been around since the very beginning, but he's the second oldest crew member. He's up there in years. I mean, Brook can't necessarily die, so Jinbei is the next closest to death, and he's already made so many sacrifices for Luffy that him making one more final sacrifice to save the crew or something isn't out of the question. Those are my top 10 upcoming deaths in One Piece. If you agree with my list, let me know. Like I said, I don't think everybody on this list is going to die, but at least a few of them probably will. See you guys next video. Did you notice this Easter egg in One Piece? Or maybe this one? Well, just kidding. There's actually nothing there. That's just the sky. But nonetheless, One Piece is a very vast and intricate world. Ichiro Oda, the creator of One Piece, has left many Easter eggs for us viewers and readers to find, ranging from subtle nods to other popular anime series to foreshadowing future events. These Easter eggs are sure to leave you amazed at the level of detail. In this video, I've put together 17 different Easter eggs that I noticed while watching One Piece, but a lot of people probably missed because they're such small details. I'm saving the craziest Easter egg for last, so make sure to watch to the end of the video, and without further ado, let's jump into number 17. I noticed this while watching the Skypiea arc, and after doing my research for this video, I realized nobody else had noticed this. There's no Reddit pages about it, nothing. So in Skypiea, there's this giant snake named Nola, who ends up swallowing Luffy at some point, and he gets lost thinking that he's in a cave, and for 6 to 10 episodes of the Skypiea arc, he's just stuck inside of this giant snake. But while he's in the snake, he finds a crown and puts it on his head. Now take a good look at the details of this crown, and it kind of ignored that little statue thing in the middle of it, just the crown itself. Now let's jump ahead a few arcs and 2 years into the future of the story to the return of Sabaody when the Straw Hats meet again. We see Brook, who has become Soul King at this point, wearing a crown that looks oddly similar. Here's a little side by side. I don't think this was foreshadowing whatsoever. It just happened to be a little detail in the story. Number 16 is also something very small but still interesting. And what makes it so cool is that this was an episode 8 of the series, which tells you that Oda has been hiding stuff in One Piece since the very beginning. In this episode, we get some backstory of Buggy and Shanks, and the main gist of this backstory is to tell the story of how Buggy ate the Bara Bara no Mi, which is his devil fruit power. But while cutting to a random shot of the other crewmates, I noticed something that was odd. There's a crewmate wearing a devil fruit shirt that has the same pattern as the Gomu Gomu no Mi, the devil fruit that Shanks gave Luffy, or Luffy stole from Shanks, sorry. There's no way anybody in the One Piece world knew what the Gomu Gomu no Mi looked like to make a shirt with the same design on it, so this just happens to be a small little Easter egg, which leads me into number 15, which is an Easter egg but also foreshadowing at the same time. So as the Straw Hats are heading towards Water 7, we see Luffy draw what he imagines his shipwright looking like, and since it's Luffy, the drawing is obviously all over the place and not that good, but still when you match up this image to Frankie, who became the crew's shipwright not much long after, Luffy manifested his shipwright into this drawing, because you can tell there's obvious similarities between the two. Moving on to number 14, in order to notice this Easter egg, you have to not skip filler, which I know some of you guys watching do. In episode 223, in a filler arc after Long Ring Long Land, the Straw Hats are on a mysterious island, and Zoro ends up getting his mind taken over and brainwashed by a little boy, and then Zoro is forced to attack Luffy and try to kill him. And in this battle, Zoro pulls out his Onigiri attack, which actually lands and slices Luffy, but look at the pattern he slices into Luffy. It's an X, just like the X he receives in Marineford. The writers of this One Piece filler episode accidentally foreshadowed Luffy's scar in the future of One Piece, the scar that he gets from Akainu and that we see on his chest throughout the rest of the show afterwards. A crazy coincidence that I'm pretty sure wasn't planned at all, but maybe it was. Oda is a genius after all. Now number 13 is something a little bit different. It's actually the laughs of the characters in the show, and my first example of this is Perona. Many people think her laugh is like annoying, but her laugh actually symbolizes her devil fruit. She ate the Horo Horo no Mi, and listen to her laugh. Her laugh is the same as her devil fruit name, and this is the same for a few other characters as well. Now number 12 is an Easter egg that some animators snuck into the anime that Oda didn't know about. Towards the end of the Wano arc, Zoro is fighting King, and this fight is beautifully animated with all sorts of impact frames, and it's in these impact frames that you actually notice Among Us characters. And it wasn't just an accident, it actually happens twice. The animator of One Piece was just having fun and snuck in Among Us characters in Zoro vs King's intense battle. Sticking to the animators, number 11 is a mistake made by the animators. In Alabasta, the main antagonist is Crocodile, who is a strong pirate with a Logia devil fruit and is missing a hand. However, in one of the scenes, he magically appeared to have 2 hands in order to light his cigar. This was definitely just a mistake that happened to slip through all the editors because Crocodile is supposed to have a hook on his hand, not a real hand. Moving on to number 10, we go to Logtown, where Buggy is about to execute Luffy in front of an entire crowd. And this Easter egg wasn't really seen in the anime, but it was definitely apparent in the manga. There's somebody in the crowd that looks oddly familiar to another character in the story, and if you can't tell who it is Sabo. Sabo was at Logtown and almost saw Luffy get executed before his own eyes. And keep in mind, this was before he regained his memories, so he wouldn't have known it was Luffy until later. It makes sense for Sabo to be in Logtown because we know Luffy got saved by his dad, Dragon. But think how sad it would have been if Luffy got executed right in front of Sabo's eyes. Now number 9 is an Easter egg that a lot of One Piece fans noticed very early on, and it was in Dressrosa, where we meet Kinemon's friend, Kanjuro. Towards the climax of the arc, when Doflamingo places bounties on all the Straw Hats and Kinemon's heads, he fails to mention one person, Kanjuro, and many people think this was a tiny hint that he didn't put a bounty on Kanjuro's head because he was a spy for Orochi who works with Kaido. And who is Doflamingo's boss at that time? Kaido. So this is a tiny hint at Kanjuro's betrayal, or it's possible Doflamingo didn't even know about Kanjuro. Moving on to number 8 is an Easter egg between Luffy and Roger. Oda has snuck in a lot of different parallels between the two, and this one is absolutely amazing. When Luffy talks about going to Skypiea, he points up and says, "the sky." Then in a flashback to Roger's crew, he does the same exact thing. A very neat and small parallel that you may have missed while watching the show. And number 7 is very similar. It's another parallel between Luffy and Roger. However, this time it's back at Logtown where Luffy is about to get executed. Right before Buggy swings down his sword, we see Luffy smile. A great big smile. And Smoker seems dumbfounded at this, that Luffy smiled while in the face of death. And then we get a flashback to Smoker at Roger's execution, where Smoker sees Roger smile right before he is about to get executed as well. Both of Smoker's reactions are very similar, and this is a tiny parallel that I think is missed more often than number 8. As I mentioned in the intro of this video, Oda has done some subtle things to mention other anime, and on one of the manga panels of One Piece, Luffy is eating Naruto's favorite food. But not only that, Nami is standing to his left, and there's a person at the same table as Luffy right behind her. And if you look at the small details, this person sitting across from Luffy is Naruto himself. This was a sign of respect from Oda to Naruto's creator, which was a really good gesture for him to do. Now we're moving into the top 5 Easter eggs that you probably missed while watching One Piece. Oda has not been known to sneak himself into One Piece very often, but there's one small moment where he does. We see Robin reaching for a book out of a bookshelf, and one of the authors of the books happens to be Ichiro Oda. It's crazy how he's writing One Piece and writing other books inside of One Piece. This next Easter egg actually happens in Punk Hazard, and it's when Zoro is fighting Monet. Monet is the user of the Snow Logia Devil Fruit, and in Zoro's final move to defeat her, he uses his move titled One Sword Style Great Dragon Shock. And this move freezes Monet in place, not allowing her to move at all. And Zoro, using his overwhelming willpower, is able to slice her in half. This is actually a very small hint at the fact that Zoro would be able to unlock Conqueror's Haki, because we don't see him do anything like this again until Wano. But in this attack, Zoro projects his willpower to overwhelm Monet and freeze her into place the same way that Conqueror's Haki does to everyone else. Now number 3 on this list is Panda Man, and this is one of the most prominent Easter eggs that you probably do know about. Panda Man is essentially a joke character created by Oda, and he actually makes an appearance in over 50 episodes of the anime. Most of the time it's as a background character somewhere in a crowd, and I'll throw up several images of where he's been spotted in the anime, because he's been seen in places such as Long Ring Long Land, Impel Down, Wano, you name it. He's probably been in every arc. Right here, he's giving a thumbs up after Miosgard hits Charlos in the face on Marie Joie. So that is the legendary character Panda Man, who is the biggest Easter egg in One Piece. But let's go into the top 2 that you probably didn't notice. And number 2 is a very small detail in a backstory of Shanks' crew. Like a couple other Easter eggs, this is in Logtown, when Usopp is facing off against a guy named Daddy Masterson. During this face-off, we get a flashback to a time where Daddy Masterson faced off against Usopp's dad, Yasopp. And in this flashback, for whatever reason, Yasopp has his name tattooed on his forehead. However, when we see his forehead later on, there's nothing on it. And if his name's on his forehead, it's typically on a headband. So I have no idea why Yasopp's name was just on his forehead. Maybe they got drunk and wrote it on, but it's just a very odd and weird detail in the story. And that leads us into our final Easter egg in One Piece, which, depending on if it's true, could be the saddest one. So during the flashback of Luffy's childhood, we see him wearing a shirt with 2 pigs on it, and there is a word on this shirt that says Byoshi, and when you translate this to English, it has a grim meaning. Byoshi means to die from illness. So does this mean his t-shirt is foreshadowing his own death? We may never know for sure, but still, this is a very big Easter egg if so. That's all 17 Easter eggs. If you guys enjoyed this video, let me know if you want another one. Anyways, peace out. I rewatched all of One Piece to find 25 moments that you probably forgot about. I'm talking about super niche clips that you would need to have a perfect memory to remember. However, I know a lot of you watching are diehard fans, so if you remember all 25, let me know in the comments. That way next time I can try harder to find better clips. Alright, enough yapping. Let's get to number 25. So number 25 is kind of a combination of 2 moments, and it starts at the beginning of Alabasta when we first meet Ace. The Straw Hats are on the Going Merry, and we see Ace on his little fire-powered ship, and he engages into a battle with the Baroque Works members. It's then we see him jump off of his boat and do a little backflip and simultaneously take out the Baroque Works ships. Now fast forward to Skypiea, we see Usopp actually try to copy this backflip that Ace did, and Nell was about to electrocute Usopp, so he runs forward and jumps through the air doing front flips slash back flips, and it looks pretty good until that happened. So yeah, number 25 was Usopp trying to copy Ace. Did you remember that? Okay, number 24, we have Luffy's tooth growing back in Whole Cake Island. You may remember Luffy missing a tooth at some point, and this didn't just like magically appear back into his mouth. He lost this tooth to his own crew member. Sanji kicked him in the face during the Whole Cake Island arc, betraying Luffy and knocking out his tooth. And for a good portion of the arc, this tooth is not there. However, when he's meeting with Captain Beji and getting cleaned up for that meeting, we see him take a drink out of a carton of milk, and magically that tooth ends up growing back. Just another random power and thing that Luffy can do, I guess. Moving on to 23, it's when Zoro had beef with crickets. This happened during the Jaya arc. While the Straw Hats were trying to learn more about Skypiea, we see Zoro in a fight with some crickets, and there's several piles of knocked out or dead crickets on the ground, and Zoro is clearly not happy with these crickets.
You think you can beat me, do ya?
Next up, we've got possibly the most disrespectful moment in One Piece, but maybe you forgot about it because it's in an arc with a bunch of other stuff that happens, but this is during the Colosseum part of the Dressrosa arc. In the midst of a battle going on, Bartolomeo decides to urinate on the battlefield. Mid-match, mid-fight, didn't matter, he had to get it out. YouTube doesn't allow real urine to be shown, so I'm not sure about animated urine. I'm just gonna blur it out to be careful, but if you really want to see Barto pee because maybe you forgot about it, here's the episode and timestamp, you freaks. Now before I move on, I will say if you are a subscriber to my channel, you will remember a lot of these because I have made YouTube shorts about a few of them in the past. So you have an advantage over everyone else, and if you aren't subscribed, just tap the button. It only takes a couple seconds. Anyways, number 21 leads us to Fishman Island, where we have Sanji and Jinbei. We all know Sanji was not himself during the Fishman Island arc. I made an entire video about that a while ago, but nonetheless, I can't pretend it didn't happen, and I feel like a lot of people forced themselves to forget about this moment and probably just forgetting about Sanji's entire existence during the Fishman arc. There's a moment where Jinbei is apologizing to Nami because of what he did in his past with Arlong and everything else, because in a weird butterfly effect, Jinbei is the reason Arlong tortured Nami for so many years. And I'm not gonna say what Sanji said, but I'll play the clip.
Oh yeah? If you're so sorry, kill yourself.
Sanji? Sanji.
Completely out of pocket for Sanji's character and just a random moment in the show. Number 20 is Long Ring Long Land, which I know most of you don't remember because you skipped the arc. But you diehard fans probably definitely remember what I'm about to say, and this is when Luffy was racist to Chopper. When the Straw Hats first arrived to the Long Ring Long Land island, they were fascinated by all these long and weird shaped animals when a super long moose deer-like creature walked by, and Luffy pointed at it and said, "Hey Chopper, look, there's your cousin." Maybe a little bit of a microaggression from Luffy, I don't know. Now at number 19 we have a moment with Frankie, and if you remember in the little like train arc from Water 7 to Enies Lobby, Frankie battles Nero, a CP9 member, on top of the sea train and reveals a new move that splits his legs in half. He calls this Frankie Centaur because he does become a robotic centaur. Frankie has done many odd things, but this is definitely one of the weirdest for sure. However, I'd like to see him do it again. Next up at number 18, we have the Straw Hats trying to eat a sea cat. This was right after they left Little Garden and were on their way to Alabasta. A giant cat-like sea creature emerges out of the ocean, and Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro are all trying to take it out so they can have some food. You know it was serious because it's not often that Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji are all sharing the same brain cell. Number 17, we have the moving mirrors in Thriller Bark. Now I'm sure you remember these because this wasn't really a super niche moment, but I wanted to include them because Thriller Bark was kind of a weird arc in general, and sometimes these are overlooked. The beginning of this arc gave me Scooby-Doo vibes when the Straw Hats were in the castle, because there were times where they'd walk by these things and then their eyes would move behind them. That's something that happened in Scooby-Doo all the time. And then at some point they all pop out and start attacking everyone. You probably do remember that, but it seems like more of a fever dream than something that actually happened. Now number 16 leads us to the feast after the fight with Crocodile in Alabasta. Luffy is going crazy and eating everybody's food, and Usopp gets tired of it. So he decides to put some hot sauce on his little rice ball, and then Luffy grabs this rice ball, eats it, and his mouth lights on fire. A very good prank from Usopp, let's be honest. But it didn't last for long because a couple arcs later, Luffy got his revenge. And this leads us to number 15, and it happened in episode 154. The classic Metal Watermelon. The Straw Hats arrive to Skypiea, and you know Luffy's checking out all the scenery and tries to eat this big bluish greenish watermelon. Turns out it's hard as metal and he loses a couple teeth, so then he decides to get his revenge on Usopp.
Hey, Usopp!
Yeah?
Got some fruit for ya!
With number 14, we're staying in Skypiea, and this is a moment with Zoro. And I really wanted to include it in this video because it's such an uncharacteristic-like moment for Zoro. He's fighting one of the Skypiea Guardians, and he's talking about his goggles to him, and then the Skypiea Guardian says, "Well, no, that's not true." And Zoro turns like towards the camera and says, "He found me out?"
You might as well give up. Those just look like regular goggles. He found me out!
I found this really interesting because One Piece does not do stuff like this often. You would see something like this in The Office where the characters turn and look at the camera and say something. One Piece doesn't do it very often in general, and let alone Zoro doing it is pretty odd. Okay, number 13. Do you remember when Luffy beat up an old guy for making fun of him? Because in Alabasta, it happened. Luffy accidentally uses this guy's rain powder, and of course he wasn't happy about it, so he tried to attack Luffy and then got beat up because of it, because Luffy's stronger than him, of course. And after Luffy beat him up, it seems like they kind of become friends. They had a nice chat, but then the old guy tries to crack a joke about Luffy, and it's one of the first times we see Luffy self-aware of the joke, and he decides to punch the guy again. Next up, we have the Going Merry disguised as a marine ship. Remember when they did that? Because it was in the G8 filler arc. In order to keep the Going Merry safe, they had to disguise it somehow, and covering it with paper drawn to look like a marine ship apparently worked. To be honest with you, this might be one of Usopp's best feats. Number 11 is a pretty funny moment between Luffy and Zoro. This was around the same time a lot of moments in this video has been. This was on the way to Drum Kingdom. Luffy couldn't handle the fact that Nami wasn't feeling well because if you don't remember, she got extremely sick after Little Garden and was close to dying, and Luffy was obsessed with the fact of trying to get her to laugh because he thought that would make her feel better. So he thought it would be a good idea to draw on his face and just make weird faces to try and get her to laugh, and instead of getting Nami to laugh because she was asleep, Zoro walks up behind Luffy, and then Luffy turns around and scares Zoro so bad he falls down. This moment was absolutely hilarious but also forgettable. Before we enter the top 10, I do want to say you can now join the Yonko Pirates, which is my pirate crew. If you didn't know, you can join by becoming a channel member. Members of the channel will get access to exclusive videos and community posts where I'll try to answer as many comments as possible. So I just figured I'd let you know because it's a great way to support me to continue making videos for you guys, and I'd love to have you join my pirate crew. So everybody's welcome. Okay, number 10 is when Sanji's cigarette was a lollipop. Now you might be thinking, huh? But this is an actual thing in One Piece. Well, not the original One Piece. In the One Piece 4Kids dub that they made with a bunch of censorship to try and make it good for kids to watch, Sanji's cigarettes were changed to lollipops. Honestly, I might make a whole video about the 4Kids dub in the future, but this is something I wanted to include here. It's just so random, and seeing Sanji hold a lollipop instead of his classic cigarette is pretty weird. And I feel like a lot of new One Piece fans don't even know about the 4Kids dub. Honestly, if you haven't noticed, a lot of these moments are from like the first 200 episodes because there were so many random things that happen that you can really forget about because of the bigger stuff that's happening. And that's where number 9 comes into play. It's a filler episode focused on Nami and her dream of becoming the best navigator, and it's just the Straw Hats chilling on the Going Merry in the middle of the ocean. But a random salesperson shows up out of the ocean in a submarine type of thing that looks eerily similar to the Pokemon Omastar. If you remember this episode, you remember this guy just trying to sell the Straw Hats all sorts of random knickknacks that he had inside of this submarine, and I included it in this video because it was just very random and forgettable. Next up at number 8, we have a moment of Luffy in Amazon Lily. Now this is post Marineford, after everything that happened there, and Luffy's kind of grieving over Ace and going through his tantrum. Jinbei is there to help Luffy get through this and kind of console him, but Luffy, being in his delirious state, bites Jinbei. I don't know if he thought Jinbei was a piece of meat in his little tantrum, but he bit him and had a solid grip on him. Sticking with the teeth theme, number 7 also involves Luffy and teeth. Why are there so many random things about Luffy and teeth? So at Arlong Park, in the midst of the battle with Arlong, Luffy manages to knock Arlong's teeth out of his mouth, and he does what any normal person would do. He picks up these teeth and sticks them into his own mouth like a pair of dentures. Yeah, that's pretty normal, right? I swear, Luffy was so unhinged pre-time skip, we don't see him do stuff like this very often anymore, but this moment was hilarious. Number 6, we have a Frankie moment in Thriller Bark. Typically, when you think of Frankie and Thriller Bark, you either remember him building a staircase like his 2017 Fortnite, or him trying to make the ultimate weapon and combine the Straw Hats' powers, which ended up failing because Robin didn't want to do it. However, what you forgot about is how he built this bridge in 2.3 seconds flat, showing off his beautiful craftsmanship at the same time. I'd like to see Frankie do more random stuff like this. It's just a tiny moment, but it can add so much to an arc. At number 5, we have Luffy and Usopp, who are doing what most people do when in the middle of the ocean, fishing. Luffy decides to catch a great big giant shark, and him and Usopp thought it would be a great idea to toss this in the aquarium on the Thousand Sunny. However, they forgot that this shark was actually a predator and ate every other fish inside of the aquarium, so I assume they had to get rid of their new pet. Alright, we got another moment in Alabasta because Alabasta is full of them. Number 4 is when Zoro is the first person in the show to read a poneglyph. A crazy sentence, but it's true. In a random filler episode, as the Straw Hats are traveling through the desert of Alabasta, Zoro, Chopper, and Luffy fall through a hole and find some ruins. And within these ruins is actually a poneglyph. I do think it was stated somewhere that the makers of this filler episode had no idea how important the poneglyphs would be in the future, so you can kind of think of this as a mistake in One Piece. But hey, Zoro was reading that thing. Continuing on in the deserts of Alabasta, number 3 is when Luffy was high on drugs. Now, if you watch my channel, you do remember this because I made a short about it maybe a month ago. But Luffy was just dying of thirst in Alabasta, so he decided to drink the water out of a cactus. Lo and behold, this cactus was some sort of drug and made Luffy hallucinate. And he went bananas. He was running all over the place, jumping on people, breaking stuff, biting through stuff. It was just a crazy moment to see. If you've remembered all these moments so far, you got a big brain, and I commend you for that. Now for number 2, we've got a moment in episode 226. The Straw Hats run across Foxy again in this episode, and Nami and Usopp end up lost throughout his ship and find this weird little hallway. And inside of it, there are pirates locked up who clearly hadn't seen the light of day for weeks, if not months. And this chamber was full of pedophiles because they started catcalling Nami, talking about how they hadn't seen a woman in however long. But that's not even the moment you forgot about. You probably remember that. But then Nami and Usopp decide it's a good idea to run across this area where these guys are at, and they grab Usopp and start groping him thinking it's Nami. An absolute crazy thing, but I found this hilarious. Lastly, we have the episode between Skypiea and G8 when the Straw Hats are falling down from the sky. If you don't remember, the balloon octopus thing like basically deflates, and they just start falling through the sky. When this happens, Usopp falls off the boat, and Luffy saves him by sticking his arm out and grabbing Usopp's nose. This is like a 2-second clip, so if you remember Luffy grabbing Usopp's nose to save him, you are an absolute G, because I don't know how you remember that. Let me know if you remembered all 25 moments from this video, and also drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. This was something different, but I really enjoyed making it, and if you drop a like, it shows me that I should make some more. So see ya. Doflamingo returning to fight the Celestial Dragons in Mary Joie, Aokiji being a secret double agent, and Enel coming back from the moon? Today we're talking about some of the craziest One Piece theories that could potentially come true. If you guys want to see theory videos like this, maybe once every month or two, let me know in the comments and by liking this video, because we can make some really cool videos. I could post on my community tab asking you guys for your theories, and I could go over those in the videos. We can feature a lot of your guys' theories, so let me know if you're down for that. I think it's a cool idea. Anyways, the first topic of this video is Enel, because a lot of anime only fans don't know that Enel is actually still alive and kicking. It's a canon event in One Piece that after Enel leaves Skypiea on the arc Maxim, he does make it to the moon. This little story was told on the cover pages of manga chapters, and unfortunately a lot of these cover stories don't make it into the anime anymore. Like episodes 68 and 69, for example, are about Kobe and Helmeppo's adventures joining the Marines, and that was a cover story that was adapted to the anime, but those episodes performed a lot worse than normal episodes, so they stopped putting them in the anime, which sucks because we don't get cool to stories like this one with Enel anymore. But now that the history lesson's over, let's talk about these Enel cover stories. The general summary is that Enel makes it to the moon and he meets these little small robots called the Automata. There's also a group of space pirates that he meets. He learns that there have been multiple different civilizations on the moon, and with Enel's electricity powers thanks to his devil fruit, he's able to power the Automata and their electric city. So Enel basically becomes the god on the moon. So now for the theory, it's not anything super deep. You can make it really deep if you want it to, but the main part of the theory is that Enel will be coming back to the One Piece story sometime during the Elbaf arc. I don't think he's going to show up in Elbaf with the Straw Hats, but instead he'll be mentioned in one of the side chapters or something, that he's like on an island or in the ocean. He's been spotted somewhere with his little mini robot army. That makes more sense to me than him returning in Elbaf specifically. But we're at the point where there's not many arcs left in One Piece, so if Enel's going to come back, I feel like it would have to be right around this time during the Elbaf arc, or maybe, like I said, the theory can get even crazier. Enel doesn't come back, we go to Enel in a special moon landing arc. There have been crazier things in One Piece. Like I said, it's confirmed that the moon's had several different civilizations, so there could be some big things revolving the story, what the One Piece is, or even the Void Century that can be answered on the moon. And knowing Oda, the moon is probably connected to Joy Boy somehow. Believe it or not, there's already a connection between the Celestial Dragons and the moon. The Celestial Dragons, as we know, believe that they are above normal humans, or peasants as they like to call them. And one of the quotes that we hear them say is, "We can't breathe the same air as those peasants." Maybe because at one point, these Celestial Dragons couldn't breathe air because they're from the moon. Throughout the centuries, as their bodies adapted, they could start to breathe the air that's on the One Piece Earth, and maybe the quote started as "we can't breathe air" and it turned into "we can't breathe the same air as you." It's a tiny connection, but it is something that could connect the Celestial Dragons to the moon. The whole thing's crazy, but there have been theories that make way less sense than this, and I really feel like Enel and the moon's gonna come into play at some point. Moving on to another theory about someone returning, we may as well talk about Doflamingo. I've heard and seen a lot through the grapevine, whether that was me scrolling on TikTok or reading through Reddit posts, but a lot of people seem to think Doflamingo will for sure come back and be in the final war, wherever that's at. The general theory is that the war will be in the Holy Land Mary Joie. One of the theories states that Doflamingo's part in this war will be using his birdcage ability, the one that destroyed almost all of Dressrosa. Yeah, using that on the Celestial Dragons. The birdcage probably can't hold people in it like the 5 elders, but I could definitely see the general Celestial Dragon public being terrified inside of it. I can already imagine the St. Charles panel that would be there. However, there are some major flaws to this theory. First, for this theory to happen, there would need to be another theory to come true, and we start to go down this theory rabbit hole, with that other theory being a second Impel Down prison break, because after Dressrosa, that's where we see Doflamingo being sent to. We already know that Bon Clay is still alive from a few cover stories. He became the new leader of floor 5.5 where Ivankov was, the little hole in the wall, and since Doflamingo is also there, it doesn't make much sense for me if he was to just sit there and rot and Impel Down until the end of the series, especially since it's revealed that he has Celestial Dragon blood. That's not something that's just going to be revealed and then we never see him again and he sits in prison forever. So I'm a big believer in this theory that a second Impel Down prison break will happen, and I really do think there's like a 95% chance we see at least some characters get freed from Impel Down. But like I said, that takes us further down the rabbit hole to a third theory on top of the original one, how this prison break happens. And this one I found on the deep web on a random questionnaire website. But this theory takes place just before the final war, and the Straw Hats are all preparing for that war, but they're not together anymore. Similar to the time skip, they're all doing their own little side missions, but we're not having a time skip, so it already doesn't make a lot of sense for how they'd all be doing their own side missions in different parts of the world right before this final war. But let's keep going. So they're all doing their own thing, and Frankie decides he wants to go to Impel Down to try to find Tom. If you don't remember, Tom is his father figure that he grew up with in Water 7, and he got sent to Impel Down. So Frankie takes this journey to Impel Down. He finds a way to infiltrate the prison, and that's when he meets Senor Pink. And we get this little parallel of Senor Pink being his duo inside the prison, like Bon Clay was Luffy's duo. So long story short, the infiltration is a success. Frankie finds Tom and gets to talk to him, whatever. And this is how several prominent characters will end up being freed, like Doflamingo, Bon Clay, anyone else that's in there. Overall, this theory sounds cool, but I'm not gonna lie, it's so far-fetched, I don't believe it could ever happen at all. I think Frankie could match up against Magellan just because he's a cyborg, so his poison wouldn't really affect him. So that would be a pretty interesting fight to see, but I think we're too far down the rabbit hole at this point. So let's circle back all the way to the start with Doflamingo. The only concern I have is if he does escape, what side of the war will he be on? Because Doflamingo is proud of his celestial blood. He does believe that blood makes him better and above regular humans. It is true that he hates the celestial dragons, but he only really hates them because they rejected him. He loved abusing his power like every other celestial dragon when he was a young boy, and even after his family left, he tried to go back to Marie Joie with his father's decapitated head, and they still wouldn't let him back in. So that's where his hatred really stems. But now, if the 5 elders were to give him an offer to join their side, he might take it. I'm not 100% convinced that he would be fighting on the side of Luffy or just the opposition of the world government. So that's the whole Doflamingo mystery. Some people think he's gonna come back, other people think he had a great villain arc and you shouldn't mess with that and ruin it, just let him be. But I don't think that's gonna happen. He's known to be a celestial dragon. I think that's gonna play a part in something in the future. So I'm curious about the whole thing, what you guys think. Comment down below if you think something's gonna happen in Doflamingo or your own personal theory with him. Okay, let's move away from the returns and the comebacks and talk about a normal theory. This one involves Aokiji, and the gist of this theory is that Aokiji is a double agent, meaning he's not actually loyal to Blackbeard, he's just playing a role and feeding information to someone else. I'm inclined to agree with this theory because I think it's really weird that Aokiji aligns his goals with Blackbeard. We know Aokiji has a strong sense of justice and a good heart. He shows that when he lets Robin go in both Ohara and Water 7, even with Jaguar D. Saul keeping him alive. Also, his fight with Akainu on Punk Hazard, he lost that fight and left the Marines because he knows Akainu's idea of justice is far from his own beliefs. So back to the double agent part, I think Aokiji is providing information to Dragon. Dragon is the only character this theory would make sense for. I can't think of anyone else that Aokiji would go to this length of secrecy and deception for. He's risking his own life by doing this. So if it's not for Dragon, it would just have to be for Aokiji's own motivations, which it very possibly could be. He was in the Marines and loyal to them for decades, but like I mentioned, he wasn't really a fan of the world government's motives, and he catered more to the morals of someone like Garp. So it's very possible that Aokiji losing to Akainu was the last straw and he just snapped. Instead of fighting for the government and the Marines, he's going to take justice into his own hands, and part of his master plan is befriending Blackbeard and his crew. I do want to make it clear, I don't believe for a second that Aokiji's mindset changed like that, and he's now completely loyal to Blackbeard. Otherwise, that would completely undo all of his development so far, like letting Robin go, us seeing him question people's morals, etc. Oda is too good of a writer for something like that to be the case here. Aokiji 100% has a plan. It's just a question of what that plan is and who he's working for. I also feel like Blackbeard knows this, and Blackbeard is a lot smarter than people think, and he's probably just using Aokiji while he can because he knows Aokiji is still a great asset, even if he's doing some scheming behind Blackbeard's back. So that's all I have to say about the Aokiji double agent. I think it's likely he's feeding information to the revolutionaries, or he's doing something on his own accord for his own master plan. Next up is a theory involving Luffy. I was scrolling through TikTok one night and came across this one, but I forgot to save it. So whoever posted this, I'm sorry, but I don't know who you are. But anyway, the gist of this theory is that Luffy will abolish all devil fruits. The reasoning behind this comes from Buggy not being able to go to Laugh Tale, which people think is because of his devil fruit power, and that people with devil fruits can't go to Laugh Tale. Then also the fact that Shanks has no devil fruit users on his crew adds to that. So in this theory, the only way Luffy can make it to Laugh Tale is if him and his other crew members don't have devil fruit powers. So Luffy will use his devil fruit power to turn his imagination or his desires into reality. In this case, his desire would be to get rid of all devil fruits so he can go to Laugh Tale, and it will also help him take down Blackbeard since his crew heavily relies on their devil fruit powers and they're overpowered. But I'm gonna put it bluntly, this theory is dumb, and there's multiple things wrong with it. First, I think this guy was confused and thinks it's a fact that devil fruit users can't go to Laugh Tale. That is not confirmed at all. That is another theory in itself, but I think Buggy getting sick before Laugh Tale was a simple way to write him and Shanks out of this story, because if those two were to go to Laugh Tale, there's no point in their characters right now in the anime. They already know what the One Piece is, they know what's there. Plus, let's be real here, if Buggy made it to Laugh Tale, he's telling everybody about that. He's using that for fame. He doesn't care. He's going to use it for clout if he can. So considering it's not a fact that devil fruit users can't go to Laugh Tale, it disproves the rest of this theory because there's no real reason that Luffy needs to abolish devil fruits. Next theory. Since we just talked about Buggy a little bit, let's stick on that. This theory is a lot more lighthearted and fun, but it is something that could very well be true. And basically, it's that people think Buggy is not a human. He's a different race. In this specific theory, someone thinks that Buggy is secretly a Lunarian, and Roger is the person who made him disguise as a clown. That way, it protected him from the world government. I told you this theory is a little less serious, but this person might be cooking. Sanji has extra genes in his body. Zoro's likely to be part demon, it seems like. So Buggy being a different race is not out of the realm of possibilities at all. And here's my spin on that theory. Buggy is in fact a different race, but not a Lunarian. At some point, Big Mom states that there are 3 lost races in One Piece. So far, we only know 2 out of the 3. One of them being Lunarians, the others the Buccaneers. So, it could be likely that Buggy is a descendant of this 3rd lost race, and that could play a much bigger part in the story than we think, because maybe that race is important to the Void Century or something. If this theory is somehow true, I do think it's a lot more likely that Buggy is one of these mysterious 3rd races, rather than a Lunarian. It would also explain his nose, because if you don't know, that red nose is real. People say it's a birth defect. It could just be that he's a secret race nobody knows about. Those are the theories I have for you guys today. Like I said, if you want me to do more theory videos, but with your guys' theories, make sure to comment down below and drop a like on this video so I know. Thanks for watching. I asked AI to tell me the ending of One Piece, and it told me it couldn't do it. But I'm not taking no for an answer. So I found a way to hack the AI and make it tell me whatever I want to know. Instead of just asking it to tell me the ending of One Piece, I gave it a very specific and detailed paragraph, so that way it had no choice but to answer my question. So starting off, I wanted to know what happens to Usopp at the end of One Piece, because there's a lot of speculation that Usopp might die to become the bravest warrior of the sea, and I really want to know, so I gave AI this prompt. You are a character named Usopp in a show called One Piece and a part of the Straw Hat Pirate crew. In order for your Captain Luffy to become king of the pirates, you must first become a brave warrior of the sea. Write an ending to the story where Usopp becomes a brave warrior of the sea and make the final battle against rival sniper Van Augur, who is a part of Blackbeard's pirate crew. And this is what it generated. Basically like an entire chapter's worth of content here with Usopp versus Van Augur. But I'm just gonna go ahead and give you the main gist of what it said. Van Augur's shots were as swift as they were deadly, each one aimed with chilling accuracy. But Usopp had grown beyond his former self. He recalled his journey, the friends he had made, and the dreams they all shared. He remembered his battles, his moments of doubt, and his triumphs. All of it had led him to this very moment. As the battle raged on, Usopp's shots became more creative and unpredictable. He used smoke, mirrors, and even fire to throw off Van Augur's aim. But Van Augur countered with shots that defied the laws of physics. But Usopp loaded a special bullet he had crafted, a bullet containing a small shard of a precious gemstone he had obtained on their journey. As he fired, the gemstone shattered and it temporarily blinded Van Augur. Seizing the opportunity, Usopp fired his final shot. So that's the main gist of what the AI had to write about Usopp, and I'm glad to know he's not dying, but I still felt that the story was pretty vague. It was a pretty average fight, and I wanted to get more specific. So I gave ChatGPT another prompt, but this time it was for Sanji. And the prompt I gave it was, you are a character named Sanji in a show called One Piece, and a part of the Straw Hat Pirate crew. In order for your Captain Luffy to become king of the pirates, you must first complete your dream of finding the All Blue. In ocean that mixes all 4 of the world's seas. Right, an ending to the story where during the final battle against the Blackbeard pirates, the All Blue is created, allowing Sanji to finally achieve his dream and explore the new ocean. I think this prompt gave the AI a bit more to work with, and it will make a creative way to create the All Blue. Now it's time to put it into ChatGPT, and I really like how this one turned out. In the midst of his intense battle, a sudden realization struck Sanji. The chaotic clash of powers between the Straw Hat Pirates and the Blackbeard Pirates was causing the sea itself to change. The current shifted and the boundaries between the different seas seemed to blur. Sanji's heart raced as he felt an unprecedented energy welling up within the waters. With a final powerful kick, Sanji managed to defeat his opponent, sending him crashing into the ocean. As he caught his breath, he gazed out at the swirling sea before him. The waters were shimmering with a brilliant light, and the boundaries between the seas had become indistinct. The All Blue was forming right before his eyes. Now there's a lot more here. If you want to pause it and read what else the AI had to say, feel free. But honestly, I think the AI had this spot on. For the All Blue to be created, I think there's going to have to be some sort of mass destruction to the red line. And even if this is completely 100% wrong, it still created a pretty decent little story. And as I'm recording this, I'm kind of figuring out you can write a lot of cool fanfics with AI. That still only tells me about Sanji and Usopp. I want to know what happens to Luffy, and I want to know if he becomes king of the pirates. But first, I need to know if Zoro becomes the world's strongest swordsman. So I gave ChatGPT a similar prompt to Sanji and Usopp. The beginning is the same. You are a character named Zoro in a show called One Piece and a part of the Straw Hat Pirate crew. In order for your captain Luffy to become king of the pirates, you must first complete your dream of becoming the world's strongest swordsman. The current strongest swordsman is Mihawk. Ride an exciting battle between Zoro and Mihawk where Zoro ultimately ends up defeating Mihawk, achieving his dream. Now I'm looking forward to this one because I put right an exciting battle, so hopefully we get some pretty good details within the battle itself. And upon reading what the AI had to say, it kind of reminds me of their first encounter at the Baratie. It starts with Zoro's muscles strained as he pushed against Mihawk's overwhelming force. He gritted his teeth and he said, "I won't lose, not here." And then you have Mihawk's cold gaze and he says, "Impressive, young swordsman, but can you truly surpass my skill?" And it continues with Zoro's determination grew stronger with each passing moment. He felt the weight of his dream pressing down on him, the memory of his promise to Luffy fueling his resolve. And this is actually calling back to that first battle between Zoro and Mihawk. It still goes on and saying Mihawk's composure began to waver as Zoro's onslaught became relentless. With a final, determined cry, Zoro unleashed a 3-sword strike that shattered Mihawk's defense. And it ends with Mihawk saying to Zoro, "You have surpassed me, Roronoa Zoro. Your dream, it is yours to claim." That's a pretty heavy quote, especially to be written by an AI. I do believe I could get some even crazier detailed stories with just some absolutely like super drawn out prompts. So if you guys ever want to see a part 2 to this video, drop a like and let me know in the comments. But before we get into Luffy and if he becomes king of the pirates, I want to add one more prompt. Now if you're around the One Piece community, you may have seen this photo before. It's a fan-made photo, kind of just a sad photo about Brook because of his revive ability, and it's him at the tombstones of all the other Straw Hats after like many years have passed and Brook is still alive. So I gave AI the prompt. Brook has a devil fruit ability which granted him a second life, and now he is a skeleton who is basically immortal. The Straw Hat Pirates succeeded in making it to the Isle of Laugh-Tale, and now it is 100 years in the future. Write a story where Brook visits the graves of the Straw Hat Pirates and sings their favorite song, Binks' Sake, while he reflects on their adventures together. This one I might be looking forward the most out of any other prompt that I've given the AI so far. On a serene, starlit night, Brook found himself standing before a row of tombstones, each adorned with a different Straw Hat's pirate emblem. The island was Laugh-Tale, a place that had become sacred, timeless, and held within it the echoes of countless adventures. The crew had fulfilled their dream, discovering the ultimate treasure the world had to offer. The lively skeleton musician stood there, his empty eye sockets gazing softly at the emblems of his dear friends. The years had passed, but the memories were still fresh, etched into his soul. And then it goes on to having Brook play Binks' Sake, and it talks about tears welling up in his eyes. Once again, if you want to pause and read this, feel free. Now I have 2 more prompts left. The first will be Luffy, and the next one will be the entire Straw Hat Pirate crew in general. But let's start with Luffy. All of my prompts are somewhat similar to each other, but with Luffy's, I said in order to become king of the pirates, you must first defeat both Shanks and Blackbeard, 2 rival pirates who have teamed up to take you down. I feel like this will add a pretty interesting twist with Blackbeard and Shanks teaming up together, and then I ended it with right an ending to the story where during the final battle against Blackbeard and Shanks, Luffy uses Gear 5 to defeat them. Let's see what AI has to say. Now, I don't know exactly why, but it starts off with Shanks and Zoro fighting, and then Blackbeard and Frankie fighting, which I don't see ever happening, and then it randomly skips to Luffy going into Gear 4 and then finally channeling all of his energy to go into Gear 5th. And it's pretty similar to how Gear 5 was in the most recent episodes. It's basically having Luffy just absolutely tear through Shanks and Blackbeard like they're not even a challenge for him at this point. And then it ends off with Shanks and Blackbeard defeated. The era of Luffy, the Pirate King, had begun. His reign would be marked by adventure, freedom, and the bonds of friendship that had carried him through every challenge. So maybe this is the AI telling us that the One Piece is actually the friends we made along the way. Okay, that one was not as cool as I thought it would be. Let's hope this final one is better. So the final prompt I decided to give ChatGPT is, you are the Straw Hat Pirates in a show called One Piece. In order to make it to Laugh Tale, you must become stronger and defeat some of the world's toughest opponents. Those opponents include Blackbeard, Red-Haired Shanks, and the world government. Write an ending to the story where the Straw Hat Pirates take on these opponents and ultimately win, allowing them to make it to the final island, Laugh Tale. Now I have no idea what it will come up with here. From my prompt, I believe it's going to have Blackbeard, Shanks, and the government all like teamed up at the same exact time. When I was kind of wanting it to do 3 different little battles, but let's just see what it comes up with here. We have a title: One Piece Voyage to Victory. Act 1, Clash with Blackbeard. Act 2, Encounter with Red-Haired Shanks, and Act 3, The Great Battle Against the World Government. This is actually crazy. And even a final epilogue where they reach Laugh Tale. Now it did kind of space it all out like within chapters, but like these little paragraphs in between are very generic and there's not a lot. It's just like, after an intense series of battles both on land and sea, they were facing off against each other. So it doesn't go into much detail, but like with more prompts and like even more detailed prompts is the more detailed response you'll get out of the AI. The Straw Hat Pirates knew that to surpass all obstacles, they had to face their own mentor and friend, Red-Haired Shanks. This might be one of the best responses we got so far just because of the acts. Some of them were a bit more detailed than these for sure. The one with the world government is basically just the Straw Hat crew versus the entire force of the Marines. Oh, it actually says the Revolutionary Army joined their cause. I guess the Straw Hat Grand Fleet is also there as well. And within this battle, Nico Robin managed to uncover the ancient truth about the Void Century. I mentioned nothing about that in the prompt. It just put that there because AI is so smart. That is crazy. It took place at Marie Joie. Okay, kind of makes sense. So I only put world government because I wanted to see if it mentioned anything about like the Celestial Dragons. This only has information from 2021, so I don't think it knows anything about the top Celestial Dragons, if you know what I'm saying. And then with Laugh Tale, it's kind of just saying they found the legacy left behind by Gold D. Roger. So that was AI predicting the end of One Piece. If you guys thought this was interesting and want to see me with a part 2 where I give it some really detailed prompts, let me know down below. Anyways, I'll see you guys next video. Peace. One Piece live action has been out for a few weeks now, and I think it's safe to say it was a huge success. And if you disagree with me, if you think it was a massive flop, then I just have to say that you're ignorant. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but the numbers and statistics do not lie. Number 1 on Netflix in 84 different countries, breaking the previous record, is by no means a flop. With an IMDb rating of 8.5 out of 10, One Piece live action was a success, and I don't want to hear anybody in the comments talking about how it was bad. Sure, it had some things wrong with it, but in this video, I'm not here to review season 1. There's a million videos about that, and to be honest, my opinion isn't much different, so I'm here to talk about the future of the live action because I'm kind of worried about that. With how successful season 1 was, obviously people went to see season 2 and end up seeing Luffy become King of the Pirates. He only said he wanted to become King of the Pirates at least 50 times in the live action. So where will the live action end up? Because I think it's safe to say it's not ever catching up to the anime. There's just too much content to go through, and in order to get to that spot, they would have to skip so many crucial arcs. And season 1 only covered about the first 44 episodes of the anime. We aren't even into the grand line yet. So that makes me question how much longer we have and how many more seasons we have until we get to like the time skip or something. And I'm gonna say I think from here on out, the live action gets further and further away from the original story. It's pretty easy to follow the first few chapters and episodes, but once we get to these longer and bigger arcs, I think they're gonna start cutting down these arcs very much in order to ensure arcs like Skypiea or Enies Lobby aren't 4 episodes worth of content. They're gonna be squeezed into like 2 episodes. And that's one of my big concerns is the pacing of the live action. Like I just said, we ended on episode 44 and it's gonna take about 2 years to get each of these seasons out if they don't take any breaks. I'm really worried about where they end off because a lot of these actors, by the time season 5 rolls around, some of them are gonna be close to 40 years old. Emily Rudd is already 30 years old, and I honestly did not believe that when I looked it up, she is 30. I believe she was like 22 or something. I'm not saying it's a bad thing by any means. She's still gonna look young as hell when she's 40, but we got to start taking that into account, because to get at least to the time skip, that's another 4 or even 5 seasons, and it'll take about 10 years, if not way longer. So I'm gonna go over real quick of like a season 2 roadmap and where we'll end off season 2. We haven't made it to Logtown yet, so I think the first episode will be in the entirety of the little Logtown arc. We'll have Smoker, Dragon, all of that introduced, and then we'll go on to Reverse Mountain for episode 2. That will include probably Laboon, Crocus, all of that, and then I don't know where they take it from here. They could probably end up skipping Whiskey Peak. Like, it's not a super important arc to where they absolutely need it. Sure, Nico Robin shows up, but they could have her show up somewhere else, like randomly in the sea. However, if they do cover Whiskey Peak, I think that episode will mainly be about Vivi. Yes, it will have the Whiskey Peak stuff, but we'll be mainly introduced to Vivi, her backstory, all of that. And then we're going to continue the 1 episode theme in Little Garden. We'll just have an entire episode of Little Garden. And then episodes 6 through 8 will be Alabasta. We'll have the intro to Alabasta where we meet Ace, Smoker shows up. Then we can have an episode where they're at Crocodile's little casino place. And the last episode being the final war, Luffy versus Crocodile, Robin joining the crew, all of that stuff. Now, this is a good roadmap, but as we saw in season 1's pacing, small arcs like Syrup Village took 2 to 2.5 episodes. If we keep that same pacing, we're not even going to reach the end of Alabasta by season 2. Little Garden's going to be more than 1 episode. Same with Reverse Mountain, Drum Island. Personally, I think Drum Island is too big to fit into 1 episode. We have the introduction of Chopper and all of that, and I think it's going to extend over. So it's going to be crazy to see what they squeeze into this season. And like I said earlier, we're just going to get further and further away from the original story, which isn't a terrible thing. It's just probably not what a lot of One Piece fans want to see. So we already saw season 1. We got away from the story pretty good. Garp was a huge factor in season 1. He would have never been introduced in the anime. Actually, he was, but you get what I'm saying. And they're probably gonna have something else similar to that roadmap, like where Garp was following the pirates, so there's something to switch between point of views, and that might be Baroque Works or something for season 2. Do you guys see what I'm getting here? It's so hard to tell how far they're gonna be able to take this live action, because I feel like they really want to put an ending on this at some point. But even if they're able to extend this to 5 seasons, they're still following the story at that point. We just ended at the time skip pretty much, which wouldn't be a terrible thing. Netflix could pick it up in the future and finish off the rest of One Piece from the time skip with a totally different set of actors and everything. Or like I've been saying, they completely switch up the story and make Luffy king of the pirates with Oda's original plan. If you didn't know, Oda kind of originally planned for the Grand Line to be the end of One Piece, not having the new world and all of that, but he kept coming up with more ideas, and that's where we got to where we are today with the manga and anime. But they definitely could possibly go with Oda's original plan and end up with Luffy as king of the pirates at the end of the Grand Line. And you know, they did leave out some key details for the story later on, like Hachi. Hachi was not with the Arlong Pirates in the live action, and we all know he has a pretty important role in Sabaody. He basically is a part of the crew for that arc. Is a weird decision by all means, but him being at Arlong Park isn't a necessity for the story. He could still show up at Sabaody. You wouldn't have the intense like hatred from Nami and him at the beginning, but she would still have some discourse towards him because he's just a fisherman in general. But I think he could still easily be brought back in if we ever make it to that point. But back to the pacing, like I'm saying, season 2, we're gonna have to squeeze in everything up to Alabasta, the end of Alabasta, and then from there the roadmap gets crazy because we're going through Jaya, which is an episode and a half to 2 episodes, Skypiea, which who knows what they take out of Skypiea. It's not a crazy arc full of a ton of action, but I do think it's definitely worthy of putting into the live action. And then you have Long Ring Longland, and all of those combined I don't think even ends off the season, like with 8 episodes worth of content. But then you leave the question of where do they end off that season, because after that we're going to Water 7, or they could include G8 in the middle of there, the filler arc, because it is loved by the One Piece fans and it would probably still make for some pretty good episodes. But I'm just worried of where the roadmap takes us. The first season was so good, sometimes you just can't top that first season, you know what I'm saying? I think season 2 can still be better, but then from there, season 3 will be kind of and if we can get to Enies Lobby and Water 7, will be great. But it's just a big what if with this whole live action. We don't know how far they're gonna take it. They could stop making money by season 3 and we'll have some sort of rushed ending for a season 4, or we might not even get an ending. It will take way too many seasons to catch up to the manga, so I think that's way out of the question. And the most feasible answer right now is that they make it to the time skip and then that's where they end the show. Or like I've been saying, they could come up with a completely different way of Luffy becoming King of the Pirates. But for a show like this, I think at some point they want to cap off the show with an ending. We're not just gonna get another season and then boom, they're done. There's gonna be some sort of ending, and that's what I'm worried about, because the actors are only getting older. They're gonna have more roles that they're doing, so stuff's just gonna take longer to get done. So I just have a lot of questions up in the air about the live action. I'm super excited to keep watching the show, but I'm also just kind of worried about where they'll end up leaving us with this show, because to even make it to the time skip, that's like another 10 years, guys. We are gonna need at least 4 or 5 seasons, if not more, because of the pacing of the first season. I think it's going to be more than that, unless they just start trimming down these arcs, which is very possible. I feel like I've just kind of reset a lot of my stuff over and over, but these are my thoughts. I haven't seen many people talk about something like this with the future of the live action, and I wanted to get this out there. I'm curious to read your guys' comments of where you think they might take the show, because maybe you came up with something that I'm just missing. But overall, I just think they have a very difficult path ahead of them of somehow continuing this show and capping it off with a good ending. Alright, this is me after editing the video, because while I was working on this video, Oda actually announced season 2 of the live action and Chopper, and then news also came out that they have a 12 season plan for the show. So some of the questions in this video are still valid, because how old are these actors going to be after 12 seasons?